The cul-de-sac of Willow Creek was a picture of suburban perfection. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and a quiet so pristine it could suffocate. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, fueled by the iron grip of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. At the heart of this storm was Ethan Caldwell, a newcomer who'd moved into 27 Willow Drive 6 months ago, seeking a fresh start after a messy divorce. Ethan, a wiry man in his late 30s with a knack for engineering, had no idea the HOA would become his greatest adversary. His property, a modest 2-story home with a sprawling backyard, backed up against a dense forest, a feature he cherished for its privacy. But the HOA saw that forest as a liability, a wild space that didn't conform to their vision of order. Ethan's troubles began when he noticed the HOA's obsession with control. Fines for a slightly overgrown hedge, warnings for parking his truck an inch past the driveway's edge, and relentless demands to trim the ancient oak that shaded his patio. He complied at first, gritting his teeth, but the final straw came when the HOA president, Marjorie Hensley, a woman with a perm as tight as her rulebook, sent a certified letter demanding he remove a small wooden gate he'd built at the edge of his property. That gate leading into the forest was Ethan's private escape, a path he'd carved for quiet walks. The HOA claimed it violated bylaws, calling it an unauthorized structure. Ethan, however, knew something Marjorie didn't. That gate was no ordinary gate. It was a calculated move, a trap he'd set not for the forest's wildlife but for the HOA itself. Ethan's gate was a masterpiece of subtle rebellion. He'd designed it to look rustic, almost haphazard, but its lock was a custom-built mechanism, wired with a hidden sensor that logged every attempt to open it. He'd installed it after noticing Marjorie's habit of inspecting properties unannounced, often crossing into private yards under the guise of community standards. Ethan had read the HOA bylaws cover to cover, discovering a loophole. Structures under a certain size didn't require approval if they served a functional purpose. His gate, he argued in a polite but firm response to Marjorie's letter, was for wildlife management, a vague enough term to skirt the rules. The HOA, unimpressed, escalated their demands, sending notices that grew sharper with each passing week. Ethan, meanwhile, checked his gate sensor logs daily, noting Marjorie's repeated attempts to access it. She'd tug at the lock, unaware of the tiny camera he'd hidden in a nearby tree, capturing her every move. Ethan wasn't just playing defense. He was building a case. The HOA's overreach was about to meet its match, but not without cost. One morning, Ethan woke to find his gate padlocked with a heavy chain, a note from the HOA taped to it. Access restricted until compliance. His own gate, on his own property, was now a prisoner of their rules. Fury surged through him, but so did a spark of satisfaction. The trap was springing, and Marjorie had no idea she'd just stepped into it. The lockout ignited Ethan's resolve. He didn't confront Marjorie directly. Instead, he doubled down on his plan. The gate sensor log showed 3 more attempts to breach it that week, all by Marjorie, her pinched face caught on camera as she wrestled with the chain. Ethan spent hours in his garage tinkering with a new device, a secondary lock, this one with a remote-activated release he could control from his phone. He installed it under the cover of night, ensuring it looked identical to the HOA's padlock. If they wanted to play games, he'd raise the stakes. Meanwhile, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers about the standoff. Ethan's neighbors, a mix of HOA loyalists and quiet dissenters, watched from their windows as Marjorie's inspections grew more aggressive. She'd taken to patrolling with a clipboard, noting every minor infraction: a child's bike left on a lawn, a mailbox with a faded number. Ethan, undeterred, began documenting her oversteps, compiling a dossier of bylaws she'd violated by trespassing and tampering with private property. The HOA's next move came swiftly, a notice of a $500 fine for non-compliance with the gate removal, plus a threat to revoke his access to community amenities. Ethan's blood boiled, but he saw the bigger picture. The gate wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a symbol of his stand against their tyranny. As the sun set on Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac, Ethan checked his camera feed one last time. Marjorie was there again, tugging at the new lock, oblivious to the fact that Ethan's trap was about to snap shut. The air in Willow Creek grew thick with tension as spring turned to summer. Ethan's gate, still chained by the HOA's lock, stood as a quiet monument to the escalating war. He'd spent weeks refining his strategy, cross-referencing bylaws with state property laws, uncovering a key detail. The HOA had no legal right to lock his gate without a court order. Armed with this, Ethan filed a formal complaint with the county, attaching his sensor logs and camera footage as evidence of Marjorie's trespassing. The county responded with a letter demanding the HOA justify their actions within 30 days. Marjorie, unaware of the complaint, doubled down, sending Ethan a new notice. The HOA was now seeking to place a lien on his property for unpaid fines, which had ballooned to $200. Ethan's neighbors began to take sides, some slipping him notes of support, others glaring as he mowed his lawn. The gate, once a private project, had become the neighborhood's dividing line. Ethan, ever the tinkerer, added a new layer to his trap, a decoy gate identical to the first built just inside his property line. He rigged it with a louder alarm, one that would blare if tampered with, ensuring the whole street would hear Marjorie's next move. Late one night, the alarm screamed, waking half the cul-de-sac. Ethan's phone pinged with a notification. Marjorie, caught on camera, had tried to cut the decoy gate's lock. Neighbors spilled onto their porches, phones in hand, recording the scene as Marjorie fled into the darkness. Ethan's heart raced with grim satisfaction. The trap was working, but the HOA wasn't done yet. They scheduled an emergency meeting to address resident non-compliance, and Ethan knew the real battle was about to begin. The emergency meeting was set for a humid Saturday morning at the community center, a squat building with peeling paint that the HOA ironically neglected. Ethan arrived early, his dossier tucked under his arm, a USB drive with his camera footage in his pocket. The room buzzed with neighbors, some curious, others hostile, as Marjorie took the podium, her voice dripping with authority. She framed Ethan as a troublemaker, a threat to Willow Creek's harmony, and proposed a vote to escalate fines and pursue legal action against him. Ethan sat quietly, waiting for his moment. When the floor opened for comments, he stood, projecting his footage onto the center's outdated projector. The room fell silent as grainy images showed Marjorie trespassing, tampering with his gate, and even tossing a neighbor's garden gnome into the bushes during one of her inspections. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ethan laid out his case. The HOA's actions were illegal, their fines baseless, and their leadership overstepping. He revealed the county's letter, which had arrived that morning, siding with him and ordering the HOA to remove their lock within 48 hours or face penalties. Marjorie's face drained of color, her clipboard trembling in her hands. The vote collapsed as neighbors, emboldened by Ethan's evidence, began questioning the HOA's authority. Some demanded Marjorie's resignation. Others called for a review of the bylaws. Ethan didn't gloat, but as he left the meeting, he felt the weight of his trap's success. The gate, still standing, was no longer just his. It was a rallying point for a neighborhood waking up to the HOA's overreach. But Ethan knew Marjorie wouldn't go quietly, and as he walked home under the midday sun, he braced for her next move. If you're hooked on this HOA showdown, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment about your own crazy neighbor stories. Stick around for the final chapter. You won't believe how this ends.